Picture this: you're standing in the heart of a desert, endless dunes stretching in every direction, the air so dry it cracks your lips. The silence is overwhelming, broken only by the whisper of wind over sand. It feels like the end of the world, but what if I told you that beneath your feet, buried under centuries of dust, lies the ghost of a paradise? This was once a land of rivers, of forests teeming with life, of civilizations that thrived in what we now call a wasteland. This is the story of the desert that used to breathe, a forgotten world hidden in plain sight, waiting to be uncovered. Thousands of years ago, before the sands took over, these barren landscapes pulsed with life. Imagine herds of elephants wandering through savannas, lakes shimmering under the sun, and people building cities where today there's only emptiness. What happened? How did these lush worlds vanish, leaving behind only whispers in the rocks and dust? The answers are written in the earth itself, in fossilized pollen that tells us what once grew here, in ancient riverbeds now buried beneath the dunes, in cave paintings that show giraffes where now there's only scorching heat. This isn't just a story about the past, it's a warning, a lesson, and maybe even a glimpse of hope for our planet's future. Today, we're going on a journey, one that starts with satellite images revealing lost rivers and ends with the crumbling ruins of cities swallowed by the desert. Along the way, we'll meet the scientists piecing together this puzzle, the explorers uncovering secrets long buried, and the ancient people who survived or didn't when their world turned to dust. This is a story of change, of resilience, and of the incredible power of nature to rewrite itself. So come with me, let's dig into the mysteries of the desert that used to breathe and discover what it can teach us about the world we live in today. Beneath the scorching sun and endless dunes of today's deserts lies an astonishing truth. These were once lands of abundance. The transformation from lush greenery to barren sand didn't happen overnight. It's a slow, relentless process called desertification, and it's shaped by forces both natural and human. Picture a thriving savanna, its grasses swaying under gentle rains, its rivers winding through valleys. Now imagine those rains fading, the rivers shrinking, the soil crumbling to dust. This is the story of how Earth's most fertile landscapes turn into deserts, and it's written in layers of sediment, the rings of ancient trees, and the ruins of civilizations that couldn't outrun the drought. One of the most powerful clues to this transformation comes from something surprisingly small: pollen. Scientists drill deep into lake beds and dry river valleys, pulling up tubes of sediment called cores. Inside these time capsules, they find pollen grains preserved for thousands of years. Each grain tells a story. Oak pollen hints at dense forests, grass pollen reveals open plains, and the sudden absence of both marks the moment the land began to die. In places like the Sahel, a belt of land south of the Sahara, these cores show how forests gave way to grasslands, then grasslands to scrub, and finally scrub to sand. The same pattern appears in the American Southwest, where ancient pueblones once farmed land that's now too dry to sustain crops. But pollen isn't the only witness. Tree rings, those concentric circles hidden inside trunks, are like nature's history books. Wide rings mean wet years when water was plentiful and trees grew fast. Narrow rings, or even gaps, tell of droughts so severe they stunted growth. By studying ancient logs, some preserved in deserts where decay slows to a crawl, scientists have pieced together centuries of climate data. What they've found is unsettling. Long before humans began altering the climate, natural shifts in Earth's orbit triggered periods of warming and drying. But today, human activity is accelerating these changes at a pace the planet hasn't seen in millennia. The mechanics of desertification are deceptively simple. When temperatures rise, evaporation increases, pulling moisture from soil and plants. Rain, when it comes, falls in shorter, heavier bursts, washing away topsoil instead of soaking into the ground. Without roots to hold it in place, the soil blows away as dust, leaving behind a cracked, lifeless crust. Overgrazing by livestock and deforestation for agriculture strip the land even faster. In the Sahel, the advance of the Sahara isn't just a natural process, it's been hastened by centuries of farming and herding practices that the fragile ecosystem couldn't support. The same story plays out in Mongolia's steppes and Brazil's Sertão, where overuse turns marginal lands into deserts within generations. Yet there's a twist to this story. Desertification isn't always permanent. In some places, like Niger's Zinda region, farmers have reversed the spread of sand by reviving ancient techniques. They protect young trees from grazing animals, allowing forests to regrow. They dig trenches to catch rainwater, giving the soil a chance to recover. Slowly, the land begins to breathe again. These small victories hint at a larger truth: deserts may be resilient, but so are the people who live on their edges. The science of desertification isn't just about loss. It's about understanding how to work with the land instead of against it, and perhaps how to turn back the tide of sand before it's too late. From high above the Earth, satellites capture more than just pretty pictures. They reveal secrets buried for centuries. These high-tech eyes in the sky can detect subtle variations in vegetation, soil composition, and even the faintest shadows cast by long-buried structures. One of the most startling discoveries came when researchers spotted the ghostly outline of an ancient river system winding beneath the sands of the Sahara. This wasn't just any river, it was part of a vast network that once turned North Africa into a lush paradise, a far cry from the barren expanse we see today. The magic behind these revelations lies in a technology called LiDAR, which stands for light detection and ranging. Think of it as a high-tech version of echolocation. A plane or drone fire's laser pulses toward the ground, measuring how long they take to bounce back. The data creates incredibly detailed 3D maps, peeling back layers of sand to expose what's hidden beneath. In the jungles of Central America, LiDAR uncovered entire Mayan cities swallowed by vegetation. In the deserts of the Middle East, it revealed sprawling caravan routes and forgotten oases, painting a picture of a world that pulsed with life and movement. One of the most dramatic examples of satellite archaeology's power is the rediscovery of the Sahara's green period. Around 6,000 years ago, this now bleak landscape was a mosaic of lakes, grasslands, and forests. Satellite images picked up ancient shorelines etched into the earth, while LiDAR mapped the beds of vanished rivers. Cave paintings in Algeria's Tassili and Naja region show giraffes, hippos, and even humans swimming, scenes that seem impossible today. These findings don't just rewrite history, they shatter the myth that deserts are static, unchanging places. They were once vibrant ecosystems, shaped and reshaped by climate shifts over millennia. But satellite archaeology isn't just about grand landscapes, it's also uncovering the small, intimate details of lost civilizations. In the deserts of Jordan, researchers using satellite imagery located a network of ancient wells and farmsteads, evidence of a sophisticated agricultural system that thrived in what's now an arid wasteland. In Egypt's western desert, thermal cameras mounted on satellites detected the heat signatures of buried stone structures, leading to the discovery of a Roman-era settlement untouched for centuries. These tools are like time machines, letting us peer through the veil of sand to glimpse the daily lives of people who walked these lands long before us. What makes these technologies so revolutionary is their ability to see what the naked eye cannot. Multispectral imaging, for example, analyzes light reflected from the Earth's surface in wavelengths beyond human vision. Healthy vegetation, buried ruins, and even ancient footpaths absorb and reflect light differently, creating spectral fingerprints that satellites can detect. In Sudan's Bayuda Desert, this technique revealed the outlines of the Kingdom of Kush's forgotten capital, its walls and streets invisible to the naked eye but perfectly clear from space. Yet for all their sophistication, these tools raise as many questions as they answer. Why did some civilizations collapse when their environment changed, while others adapted? How did ancient people navigate the shifting boundaries between fertile land and desert? And perhaps most urgently, what can these lost worlds teach us about our own future in an era of climate change? The deserts are speaking if we know how to listen. And with every new scan, every fresh image from orbit, we're learning to decipher their stories one pixel, one laser pulse, one buried river at a time. Beneath the shifting sands of the Rub al-Khali, the vast, empty quarter of Arabia, scientists have uncovered a secret that defies the desert's lifeless reputation. Hidden in layers of sediment lie tiny, golden grains of pollen, perfectly preserved for thousands of years. These microscopic time capsules tell a story that would astonish anyone standing in today's scorching dunes. This was once a land of acacia forests, freshwater lakes, and grasslands stretching as far as the eye could see. The pollen doesn't just reveal what grew here, it paints a vivid portrait of an ecosystem teeming with life, where hippos wallowed in wetlands and early humans gathered around watering holes. But pollen isn't the only messenger from this lost world. Fossilized bones, some no larger than a fingernail, others belonging to creatures the size of elephants, whisper of a time when deserts were anything but barren. In the heart of the Sahara, paleontologists have unearthed the remains of fish, crocodiles, and even ancient buffalo, species that couldn't survive a single day in the current arid hellscape. One remarkable discovery in the Arabian desert was a set of footprints preserved in hardened mud, showing humans and animals walking side by side toward a long-vanished lake. These aren't just fossils, they're snapshots of daily life in a green paradise now buried under dunes. The real magic happens when scientists piece together these clues like a jigsaw puzzle. By drilling deep into dry lake beds, they extract cylindrical cores of sediment, each layer a page in Earth's diary. Near the bottom, they might find pollen from dense forests, suggesting a wet, humid climate. Higher up, grass pollen dominates, signaling the arrival of drier conditions, and at the very top, the pollen vanishes altogether, replaced by sterile sand. This layered record reveals how ecosystems transformed in slow motion, giving us a front-row seat to the death of a landscape. In the Thar Desert of India, for example, sediment cores show that a thriving mangrove forest gave way to scrubland, then to desert, as monsoon rains retreated over centuries. What's even more astonishing is how these ancient plants and animals adapted or didn't, as their world dried up. Some species, like the acacia trees whose pollen still lingers in Arabian sands, evolved deep roots to tap into vanishing groundwater. Others, like the giant Civatherium, a prehistoric giraffe relative whose fossils dot the Sahara, simply couldn't cope and vanished. Human communities faced the same stark choices: migrate, innovate, or perish. In the Rub al-Khali, stone tools scattered near fossilized lake beds suggest that our ancestors clung to these oases until the last drop of water disappeared, then moved on in search of greener horizons. These fossil clues do more than satisfy our curiosity about the past. They hold urgent lessons for the present. As climate change accelerates desertification today, the same patterns emerge: shrinking water sources, shifting vegetation, and desperate migrations. The bones and pollen of ancient deserts remind us that environmental collapse isn't theoretical. It's happened before, with consequences etched into the very ground we walk on. But they also offer a glimmer of hope. If life once flourished here against all odds, perhaps it could again. The deserts haven't forgotten their green past. And neither should we. Rivers are the lifeblood of any landscape, but in deserts, their absence speaks louder than their presence. Walk across the cracked earth of the Sahara or the Arabian Peninsula today, and you'd never guess that mighty waterways once carved through these lands. Yet beneath the silence of the dunes, the ghosts of rivers whisper stories of a different time, a time when water flowed freely, nourishing civilizations that rose and fell with its currents. While the Nile, Tigris, and Euphrates still hold their place in history books, lesser-known rivers like Sudan's Wadi Howe or tell an equally dramatic tale. This ancient river, now reduced to a dry scar in the earth, once stretched over 600 miles, supporting thriving communities where today there's only wind and sand. The story of these vanished rivers isn't just about water. It's about the fragile pact between humans and their environment. Take the Garamontes of the Libyan Sahara, a civilization that flourished around 2,000 years ago. They built an intricate network of underground tunnels called fagaras to tap into fossil water reserves, turning the desert into a breadbasket. But when the groundwater ran dry, their empire crumbled, leaving behind silent ruins and a warning etched in stone. Similarly, in Central Asia, the Amu Darya River once fed the Khwarezm Empire, a powerhouse of trade and culture. But as the river shifted course, diverted by natural forces and human engineering, the empire's cities were swallowed by the Kizilkum Desert. These aren't isolated tragedies. They're part of a pattern repeated across the globe, where the fate of societies is tied to the whims of waterways. What makes these lost rivers so fascinating is how they reshape our understanding of deserts. Satellite imagery has revealed sprawling paleochannels, ancient riverbeds hidden beneath the sands of Arabia, some wider than the Amazon. These waterways didn't just vanish overnight. Climate shifts like the weakening of monsoons or changes in Earth's orbit turned flowing rivers into intermittent streams, then into dusty ravines. In Oman's Wahiba sands, geologists have found layers of river gravel buried beneath dunes, proof that water once raced across what's now a sea of sand. Even more astonishing are the radar rivers detected by space-based sensors in Egypt's western desert. Entire drainage systems invisible to the eye but unmistakable to technology, hinting at a time when rain fell regularly enough to sculpt the land. The human cost of these disappearing rivers is written in abandoned cities and forgotten roads. Along the Wadi Howe, archaeologists have uncovered stone tools, pottery, and even cattle bones, evidence of pastoral communities that thrived here when the river flowed. When the water vanished, so did they, leaving behind only circles of stones where their homes once stood. In the Thar Desert of India, the Ganga-Hakra River, believed by some to be the mythical Sarasvati of Hindu texts, once supported the Harappan civilization. As it dried up, cities like Mohenjo-Daro were abandoned, their residents scattering in search of new water sources. These migrations weren't just movements of people, they were desperate journeys for survival, reshaping cultures and histories across continents. Yet there's a twist to this story. Some rivers didn't just disappear, they were betrayed. In Mesopotamia, the cradle of civilization, farmers began over-irrigating their fields, unaware that the slow buildup of salt in the soil would eventually poison their crops. The very water that gave life to their fields also carried the seeds of decline. Today, satellite images show the traces of this ancient salinization in the whitened earth, a cautionary tale for modern agriculture in arid regions. Similarly, in the American Southwest, the Hohokam people dug over 1,000 miles of canals to harness the Gila and Salt rivers, only to see their system collapse under the weight of droughts and overuse. Their fate mirrors challenges we face today as rivers like the Colorado dwindle under growing demands. Studying these lost waterways isn't just an exercise in nostalgia, it's a key to understanding our future. As climate change alters precipitation patterns and rising temperatures increase evaporation, modern rivers face pressures eerily similar to those that doomed their ancient counterparts. The Indus, the Niger, the Murray Darling all are experiencing strains that could reshape the societies depending on them, but there's hope in the lessons of the past. Indigenous water management techniques like the qanats of Persia or the sand dams of Kenya offer blueprints for resilience. By listening to the whispers of vanished rivers, we might just learn how to keep ours flowing. The ruins of the Garamontes rise from the Libyan desert like a mirage, crumbling walls of mud brick and stone, the remnants of a kingdom that shouldn't have existed. In a land where rain might not fall for years, they built an empire by coaxing water from the earth itself. Their secret, a labyrinth of underground tunnels called fogaras, some stretching for miles, tapping into ancient aquifers deep below the sand. These weren't just ditches, they were feats of engineering with vertical shafts dug every few yards to allow maintenance and airflow. For centuries, the fogaras turned the Sahara's edge into a patchwork of date palms and wheat fields, sustaining cities of tens of thousands. Then, slowly, the water tables dropped, the tunnels ran dry, and the Garamontes faded into legend, leaving behind silent wells and the ghosts of orchards swallowed by dunes. Half a world away, another desert civilization faced the same existential challenge, but their solution was carved in rock, not earth. The Nabateans of Petra didn't just survive in the arid wastes of Jordan, they thrived, transforming their cliffside city into a glittering hub of trade. Their genius lay in capturing every drop of water that fell. They sculpted the very mountains into a network of channels, cisterns, and reservoirs, some so precisely engineered that they still function today. During rare downpours, runoff from the surrounding hills would funnel into massive stone tanks, enough to sustain 30,000 people through years of drought. But even the Nabateans couldn't outlast nature forever. When shifting trade routes and a series of earthquakes disrupted their water systems, Petra's glory days ended. The desert reclaimed its streets, leaving only the iconic treasury facade to hint at the wealth that once flowed here, both in gold and in water. What's haunting about these civilizations isn't just their disappearance, it's how closely their fates mirror our own. Take the ancient city of Timbuktu, perched on the edge of the Sahara. Its scholars once wrote of lush gardens and a Niger river so wide it seemed a sea. But as the desert advanced, the river shrank, and the knowledge that flourished in its libraries turned to whispers. Today, the same sands that buried Timbuktu's outskirts creep toward modern cities like Nouakchott in Mauritania, where the ocean of dunes advances several yards each year. The difference: we have satellites to track the threat, yet still struggle to stop it. Perhaps the most poignant lesson lies in the American Southwest, where the ancestral Pueblones built cliff dwellings like Mesa Verde. Their walls, tucked beneath overhanging rock, kept them cool in summer and sheltered in winter. They stored water in cleverly positioned clay pots that cooled through evaporation and farmed drought-resistant crops like amaranth. But when a decades-long megadrought struck in the 1300s, even these adaptations weren't enough. tree rings tell the story year after year of stunted growth until finally the people left. Their descendants, the modern Pueblo tribes, carry forward traditions born from that collapse, like seed-saving practices designed to outlast arid times. These lost civilizations share an unnerving pattern. Their greatest innovations often sowed the seeds of their decline. The Garamontes Fagaras drained aquifers faster than they could recharge. The Nabateans' reliance on trade left them vulnerable when routes shifted. And everywhere, the story repeats societies pushing their environment to the brink, then faltering when the balance tips. Yet there's hope in the details. In Morocco's Dra Valley, centuries-old Qattara irrigation systems still nourish date palms, passed down through generations. In Peru, modern engineers are reviving pre-Incan puquillos, underground spirals that condense fog into drinking water. The ruins beneath the sand aren't just tombstones, they're textbooks written in stone and soil, waiting for us to read them. 5,000 years ago, the Sahara wasn't the sea of sand we know today. It was a sprawling savanna, a mosaic of grasslands, lakes, and rivers stretching as far as the eye could see. In Algeria's Tassili Anaja Plateau, the proof is etched into the rock: cave paintings of giraffes grazing, elephants wading through wetlands, even humans swimming in what must have been cool, inviting waters. These images seem surreal against the backdrop of today's scorching, barren dunes, yet they're a direct window into a lost world. The Sahara didn't just change, it underwent a total transformation, flipping from a lush paradise to one of the harshest deserts on Earth. But how? The answer lies in the slow dance of our planet's orbit. Earth doesn't spin perfectly upright. It wobbles slightly on its axis over thousands of years, a phenomenon called axial precession. Around 6,000 years ago, this wobble tilted the northern hemisphere just a fraction closer to the sun during summer months. That tiny shift supercharged the West African monsoon, pulling moisture-laden winds deep into what's now the Sahara. Rain fell in abundance, filling lakes the size of small seas. One of these, Lake Mega Chad, covered over 150,000 square miles, larger than the Caspian Sea today. Its remnants linger in Chad's shrinking Lake Chad, a puddle compared to its ancient ancestor. But orbital changes don't flip a switch overnight. The Sahara's greening and subsequent drying played out over centuries, even millennia. Sediment cores from dried lakebeds tell the story in layers. Pollen from grasses and trees gives way to dust, marking the moment the rains retreated. The monsoon weakened, the lakes evaporated, and the sand advanced. This wasn't a sudden catastrophe, it was a slow-motion unraveling, a lesson in how climate shifts can reshape civilizations. The people who painted those cave scenes likely watched their world change in real time, adapting season by season until the land they knew was gone. What makes the Sahara's story so chilling is how familiar it feels today. While ancient climate shifts were driven by natural cycles, modern desertification is turbocharged by human activity. Overgrazing, deforestation, and rising global temperatures are replicating the same patterns but at a breakneck pace. In places like Lake Chad, history seems to be repeating. The lake has shrunk by 90% in the last 60 years, displacing millions who depend on its waters. The difference is, this time, we're not passive observers. Satellite data, groundwater management, and sustainable farming offer tools our ancestors never had to slow the march of sand. Yet the Sahara's green past also holds a glimmer of hope. If such a radical transformation happened once, could it happen again? Some scientists believe orbital cycles could eventually favor regreening, though not for thousands of years. Others point to ambitious projects like the Great Green Wall, an African-led effort to plant a barrier of trees across the Sahel. Whether natural or human-driven, the Sahara reminds us that deserts aren't eternal. they're snapshots in an ever-changing story. The caves of Tassili Enaja don't just show us what was lost, they whisper that even the driest lands remember how to breathe. For centuries, the lost city of Ubar existed only in whispers, a place of towering pillars and unimaginable wealth, swallowed by the desert as punishment for its arrogance. Arabian folklore called it the Atlantis of the Sands, a cautionary tale buried beneath dunes. Even the Quran referenced a prosperous people called the Ad, struck down for their hubris. Many scholars dismissed Ubar as pure myth until a team of archaeologists staring at satellite images noticed something strange in Oman's empty quarter. Faint geometric lines, invisible from the ground, traced the outline of walls and towers beneath the sand. The legend was real. What they unearthed was a city built atop the very thing that doomed it: water. Ubar thrived as a hub of the frankincense trade, its wealth flowing from caravans carrying the precious resin across the desert. But its lifeblood was an underground limestone cavern, a natural reservoir that fed wells and enabled survival in the harsh environment. Over centuries, the weight of the city above, combined with relentless groundwater extraction, caused the cavern's roof to collapse. The ground literally opened up, swallowing buildings and people in a catastrophic sinkhole. The desert rushed in to claim the ruins, leaving only echoes in Bedouin poetry. Ubar's discovery rewrote history in more ways than one. The city's layout revealed advanced engineering-raised platforms to avoid sand drifts, cisterns lined with waterproof plaster, and cleverly angled walls to deflect wind erosion. These weren't the crude structures of a backward civilization. They were the innovations of a people who understood their fragile place in the desert. Yet their fate underscores a universal truth: no amount of ingenuity can outlast nature's patience. The same sands that preserved Ubar's ruins for millennia also erased all memory of its existence outside of legend. What makes Ubar's story so compelling is how it mirrors modern dilemmas. Like ancient frankincense traders, we still build cities in precarious places: Las Vegas blooming in a desert, Dubai skyscrapers perched on sinking coastlines. Our reservoirs drain aquifers faster than they recharge, just as Ubar's wells tap the cavern below. The difference: we have satellites to warn us, yet the allure of short-term prosperity often drowns out the whispers of history. Ubar's ruins stand as a stark reminder. Civilizations that forget their dependence on the environment write their own epitaphs in sand. But there's another layer to this mystery. Ubar wasn't just lost, it was forgotten so completely that its very existence became myth. Unlike Pompeii, preserved in volcanic ash with its tragedies frozen in time, Ubar's disappearance was slow, its memory eroded by wind and generations. This raises a haunting question: how many other cities lie beneath the world's deserts, their stories erased not by sudden catastrophe, but by the patient, relentless advance of sand? As technology peels back the dunes, we're only beginning to grasp how much human history remains buried, waiting to rewrite what we thought we knew. Bones don't lie, and the fossils emerging from desert sands tell a story so bizarre it feels like science fiction. Picture a Sahara where not just elephants but their ancestral giants, the Paleoloxodon, towered over grasslands. These creatures stood nearly 15 feet tall, their tusks curving like scimitars, their footprints sinking deep into mud that would one day become stone. Nearby, the Civatherium, a giraffe relative with stubby horns and the bulk of a moose, browsed on acacia leaves. These weren't solitary oddities. They were part of a thriving ecosystem that included buffalo the size of compact cars and hippos wallowing in lakes that have long since turned to dust. What's astonishing isn't just the size of these animals, it's what their presence reveals about the deserts they called home. Teeth tell tales. The worn molars of a fossilized giraffe ancestor found in Arabia's Nephad Desert show it spent its life chewing leaves, not the tough, dry shrubs that survive there today. Similarly, the bones of fish and crocodiles unearthed in the heart of the Sahara suggest networks of rivers deep enough to support aquatic life. These weren't hardy desert specialists. They were creatures that needed abundant water and greenery, proof that arid zones like the Rub al Khali were once as lush as the Serengeti. The real detective work begins when scientists examine how these giants vanished. Some, like the ancient elephant species, evolved into smaller, desert-adapted forms. Their modern descendants still trek across Mali's Sahel region during droughts, following ancestral migration routes etched into genetic memory. Others, like the Civatherium, hit an evolutionary dead end. Their massive bodies required too much food and water to survive as the land dried, leaving them stranded in a changing world. The same sediments that preserve their fossils also hold clues to their demise. Layers of pollen shift from diverse forest species to drought-resistant grasses, then finally to sterile dust. It's an environmental obituary written in stone, but here's the twist: some megafauna didn't just disappear, they left behind living clues. The addax, a critically endangered antelope with splayed hooves for walking on sand, is a relic of the Green Sahara. Its DNA holds adaptations forged when its ancestors roamed wetlands, then reshaped by millennia of desertification. Even the humble jerboa, a desert rodent with kangaroo-like legs, shares ancestry with creatures that once lived in humid woodlands. These animals are time capsules carrying biological blueprints of ecosystems lost to the sands. The lesson of desert megafauna isn't just about the past, it's a warning etched in bone. As modern climate change accelerates habitat loss, we're witnessing similar pressures on today's giants. Desert-adapted elephants in Namibia now walk farther for water than their ancestors ever did, mirroring the struggles of their Pleistocene relatives. The fossil record shows us what happens when environments change too fast for species to adapt, collapse, but it also reveals resilience. The survivors that evolved, migrated, or clung to shrinking oases. In their bones, we find both a cautionary tale and a roadmap for conservation, written by time itself. When the rains stopped and the rivers vanished, ancient peoples faced a choice: perish or adapt. Some, like the Berbers of North Africa, chose movement over permanence. Their nomadic lifestyle wasn't just about following herds, it was a finely tuned response to scarcity. By rotating grazing lands and traveling light, they ensured no single area was stripped bare. Their goats and sheep weren't just livestock, they were mobile water filters, converting sparse vegetation into milk and meat while their droppings fertilized the soil. The Berbers' knowledge of hidden wells and seasonal routes turned the Sahara's harshness into a survivable landscape, a strategy so effective that modern Tuareg caravans still trace these ancient paths today. Others turned to architecture as their weapon against drought. The ancestral pueblones of the American Southwest didn't just build homes, they engineered microclimates. Their cliff dwellings at Mesa Verde and Choco Canyon were masterclasses in passive cooling. Thick stone walls absorbed heat by day, releasing it slowly at night. Windows aligned with solstice sunbeams to mark planting seasons, while recessed alcoves kept stored crops dry and rodent-free. But their true genius lay in water capture. Intricate systems of check dams and terraces slowed rainwater runoff, allowing it to seep into the soil rather than vanish in flash floods. These weren't just buildings, they were life support systems carved into rock. Halfway across the world, the Nabateans took water conservation even further. At Petra, they carved gargoyle-like spouts into cliff faces to direct every precious drop into cisterns. Their hidden pipelines, some running for miles underground, were engineered with precise slopes to maintain flow without evaporation. What's remarkable isn't just their technology, it's their mindset. They celebrated water as sacred, decorating fountain houses with intricate carvings. This cultural reverence for moisture may have been their greatest survival tool, embedding conservation into daily life long before sustainability became a modern buzzword. Yet adaptation sometimes meant heartbreaking compromise. In China's Tengger Desert, archaeologists have uncovered villages where doorways were gradually raised over generations as creeping sand dunes swallowed homes. Floor levels were lifted, then lifted again, until finally the battle was lost. These silent strata tell a story of stubborn resilience, people clinging to ancestral lands until the last possible moment, then vanishing into the wind. The real lesson from these ancient adapters isn't just about techniques, it's about flexibility. When the Garamontes' underground tunnels ran dry, their society collapsed. But the Bedouins switched from settled farming to nomadic herding when rains failed, preserving their culture through mobility. Today, as wells run dry from Arizona to Andhra Pradesh, these old strategies take on new urgency. Indigenous Australians' practice of fire stick farming, controlled burns to encourage new growth, is being revived to prevent wildfires in drought-stricken regions. Ancient Peruvian fog catchers, nets that harvest moisture from mist, are inspiring modern water projects from Chile to Morocco. Perhaps the most profound insight lies in what these cultures didn't do. There's little evidence of large-scale warfare over water in most ancient desert societies. Instead, they developed intricate sharing systems and drought protocols. The Berbers' traditional water courts, where disputes were settled communally, or the Puebloans' ceremonial rain dances that reinforced collective responsibility, show how social innovation walked hand in hand with technological solutions. As climate change tightens its grip, these forgotten blueprints for cooperation may prove as valuable as any irrigation system. The deserts of the past whisper a simple truth: survival isn't just about conquering nature, but learning to move with its rhythms. Earth's climate has never stood still. It breathes in cycles spanning tens of thousands of years. Picture massive glaciers creeping across continents during ice ages, locking up so much water that sea levels dropped by hundreds of feet. Coastlines expanded, land bridges emerged, and deserts grew as rainfall patterns shifted. Then, as temperatures rose during interglacial periods, the ice retreated, seas reclaimed the land, and regions once choked by dust burst into life. The Sahara's transformation from grassland to desert and back again wasn't a one-time event. It's happened at least 5 times over the past 250,000 years, each swing tied to the rhythmic pulse of Earth's orbit. These cycles hinge on subtle celestial mechanics. Serbian scientist Milutin Milankovic mapped how variations in Earth's tilt, wobble, and orbit alter sunlight distribution, now called Milankovitch cycles. When slight changes reduced summer sunlight in the northern hemisphere around 20,000 years ago, ice sheets expanded, and deserts like the Kalahari stretched their boundaries. Conversely, 8,000 years ago, a favorable alignment supercharged monsoons, turning the Sahara into a patchwork of lakes where hippos thrived. These aren't abstract theories, they're written in ocean sediments, where layers of dust from ancient dry periods alternate with shells from wet eras. But here's what's startling: these natural shifts unfolded over millennia, giving ecosystems time to adapt. Today, human-driven climate change is compressing similar transformations into decades. The Anasazi of the American Southwest had centuries to adjust as the medieval warm period parched their lands. Modern farmers in the same region watch wells dry up within a single generation. Even more striking are the echoes of past cycles in today's landscapes. Australia's Simpson Desert, now a sea of red dunes, was once speckled with freshwater lakes during the last interglacial period. Their fossilized shorelines, visible from space, trace shorelines that could return if climatic conditions repeat. The lesson of these cycles isn't just about inevitability, it's about resilience. In Oman's Dhofar Mountains, frankincense trees still grow in valleys that were arid during ice ages but greened when rains returned. Their resin, harvested for millennia, carries chemical signatures of these climatic swings. Similarly, the Nubian sandstone aquifer beneath Egypt's western desert holds water deposited during wet phases tens of thousands of years ago, a subterranean ark from greener times. These natural archives prove that today's deserts are temporary states in a planetary story far grander than human timelines. Yet there's a crucial difference this time. Past climate shifts occurred without industrial civilizations pumping greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. The current interglacial period, called the Holocene, has been unusually stable, a 12,000-year stretch that allowed agriculture and cities to flourish. Now, as we disrupt that stability, the old rules may no longer apply. Will expanded deserts become permanent, or could natural cycles eventually reverse them? The answer lies somewhere between geology's slow patience and humanity's urgent ingenuity. One thing is certain: the sands remember their past lives, and they're always ready to rewrite the story. The sky turned black at noon, not from storm clouds, but from towering walls of dust that swallowed the sun. This was the Dust Bowl of the 1930s, a disaster that didn't just happen to America's Great Plains. It was made by human hands. For generations, settlers had viewed the prairie's deep-rooted grasses as obstacles to be plowed under, not as the very fabric holding the land together. When drought struck in the 1930s, the exposed topsoil, stripped of its natural anchors, lifted into the air like a biblical plague. Dust storms so thick they buried tractors, so relentless they filled homes even with windows sealed shut, transformed fertile farmland into a wasteland overnight. But this wasn't just bad luck, it was a perfect storm of ignorance, greed, and ecological fragility. What made the Dust Bowl so devastating was how quickly the land turned against its stewards. In the 1920s, soaring wheat prices and new gasoline-powered tractors encouraged farmers to rip up millions of acres of native grass. The soil, held in place for millennia by prairie roots stretching 9 feet deep, now lay naked under the searing sun. When the rain stopped in 1931, the ground cracked like pottery. Winds sweeping down from the Rockies grabbed the loose earth, hurling it eastward in storms that dumped 12 million tons of dust on Chicago in a single day. By 1934, an area the size of Pennsylvania had lost its topsoil entirely, creating a man-made desert in the heart of America. The parallels to natural desertification are uncanny. Just as overgrazing turns African savannas to dust, or deforestation accelerates the Sahara's spread, the Dust Bowl showed how human actions can turbocharge environmental collapse. But there's a crucial difference where deserts like the Sahara took centuries to form. The Dust Bowl unfolded in a decade. Photographs from the time show cars buried up to their roofs in drifts of fine powder, looking more like artifacts from Mars than the American Midwest. The crisis birthed new terms: black blizzards for the deadly storms, dust pneumonia for the lung disease killing livestock and children alike. This wasn't just an agricultural failure, it was a preview of how recklessly we could alter an entire region's climate. Yet the Dust Bowl also became a turning point in environmental awareness. The Soil Conservation Service, created in 1935, taught farmers techniques like contour plowing and crop rotation methods borrowed from ancient practices worldwide. Government-funded shelter belts, rows of trees planted as windbreaks, echoed the Qanat systems of Persia or the Fagaras of the Garamontes. Even the art of the era, from Dorothea Lange's haunting photographs to Woody Guthrie's dust-choked ballads, served as a warning: ignore the land's limits and it will fight back. Today, the lessons of the Dust Bowl ripple through modern crises. California's Central Valley, overpumped for irrigation, is sinking as aquifers collapse, a process called subsidence that mirrors the 1930s topsoil loss. In Brazil's Cerrado region, soybean fields expand at the expense of native vegetation, threatening to unleash another dust bowl in the tropics. But there's hope in the recovery. Parts of the Great Plains, left to revert to grassland, have shown remarkable resilience, proving that even the deepest wounds can heal when given time. The Dust Bowl wasn't just a tragedy, it was a crash course in humility, reminding us that no matter how advanced our technology, we're still at the mercy of the very ground beneath our feet. Amidst the endless sea of sand, oases rise like emerald miracles, pockets of life clinging to ancient water. These shimmering islands aren't just stops for weary travelers. They're living museums, preserving ecosystems and cultures that once flourished across now vanished green worlds. Take Siwa in Egypt, a splash of palm groves and salt lakes cradled between dunes. Its springs bubble up from the Nubian sandstone aquifer, a subterranean reservoir filled during the Sahara's wetter epochs. The water here is older than the pyramids, a relic from a time when rain fell regularly enough to replenish the earth. But Siwa's magic isn't just in its water, it's in the people who have thrived here for millennia. The Berber-speaking Siwans still cultivate date varieties found nowhere else, using irrigation techniques passed down since pharaonic times. Their gardens are genetic arks, sheltering crops that once fed much larger populations before the desert tightened its grip. Further west, Algeria's Timamaun oasis tells a different story of survival. Here, the water doesn't rise willingly, it's coaxed from the ground through a network of fagaras, underground channels inspired by the ancient Garamontes. These tunnels, some stretching miles, slope gently to guide water by gravity alone, minimizing evaporation under the blistering sun. The result is a labyrinth of orchards where pomegranates and henna grow beneath date palms, their roots drinking from hidden streams. Timamaun's true marvel, though, is its architecture. Homes built from mud mixed with salt, their facades shimmering like frost in the sunlight. This isn't just practicality, it's poetry written in earth and water, a testament to human ingenuity in the face of scarcity. What makes oases so extraordinary is their dual role as biological and cultural time capsules. In Oman's Wadi Bani Khalid, endemic fish species dart through pools that have remained unchanged for 10,000 years, their DNA holding secrets of adaptation. Meanwhile, the libraries of Chinti in Mauritania safeguard medieval manuscripts on camel skin and parchment texts that would have crumbled in humid climates but survive in the desert's dry embrace. These places aren't just refuges, they're archives safeguarding knowledge and biodiversity that once spanned entire regions. Yet oases are more than relics, they're blueprints for resilience. In Morocco's Dra Valley, farmers alternate crops between date palms, fruit trees, and vegetables in vertical layers, mimicking natural forest ecosystems. This oasis agroforestry yields 3 times more food per drop of water than industrial farming, a lesson in efficiency honed over centuries. Even the wildlife here has adapted uniquely. Desert foxes in Israel's Ein Gedi oasis have learned to sip nectar from night-blooming flowers, a behavior unseen in their arid-dwelling cousins. The fragility of these sanctuaries, though, is impossible to ignore. As aquifers are drained for megacities and agriculture, oases from Turpan in China to Tozeur in Tunisia are shrinking. The ancient water that fed them for millennia is being spent in decades, leaving cracked earth and abandoned villages in its wake. But there's hope in the stories they carry. When scientists studied the drought-resistant crops of Oman's Al Hajar oasis, they discovered genes that could help modern wheat survive climate change. The past, it seems, still holds answers for the future, if we're wise enough to listen before the last springs run dry. Deep in the deserts of the Middle East, hidden in caves so dry the air feels like parchment, some of history's greatest literary treasures have survived against all odds. The Dead Sea Scrolls, discovered in 1947 by a Bedouin shepherd searching for a lost goat, are perhaps the most famous example fragile fragments of biblical texts and community records from 2,000 years ago, preserved in the perfect conditions of Qumran's arid caves. Without the desert's relentless dryness, these delicate parchment and papyrus documents would have crumbled into dust centuries ago. Instead, they offer us an unprecedented window into religious thought, political struggles, and daily life during a pivotal era. But the desert's archival powers extend far beyond these well-known scrolls. In Egypt's eastern desert, archaeologists recently uncovered a cache of Greek and Coptic texts in the ruins of a Roman-era garbage dump. The site, called Oxyrhynchus, yielded shopping lists, marriage contracts, and even fragments of lost plays by Sophocles' ordinary documents that became extraordinary by surviving in the bone-dry sands. Meanwhile, in China's Taklamakan Desert, the ruins of ancient Silk Road cities have given up Buddhist scriptures written on birch bark, their ink still legible after 1,000 years. These aren't just old papers, they're time machines, transporting us directly into the minds and concerns of people separated from us by centuries. What makes these desert archives so remarkable is how they capture voices often missing from official histories. At Al-Ula in Saudi Arabia, inscriptions carved into sandstone cliffs record the everyday transactions of the Lihyanite kingdom, not the grand proclamations of kings, but the business dealings of spice traders and camel herders. Similarly, the Geniza documents found in Cairo's Ben Ezra synagogue include personal letters that reveal intimate details of medieval Jewish life around the Mediterranean. The desert's protective dryness preserved not just the high culture of elites, but the messy, vibrant reality of ordinary existence. The science behind this preservation is as fascinating as the texts themselves. In humid climates, organic materials fall victim to mold, insects, and bacterial decay within decades. But desert conditions create a natural mummification process. Lack of moisture prevents microbial growth, while stable temperatures slow chemical breakdown. Even more surprising, some of the best preserved texts come from places that seem least likely to safeguard them. The Cave of Letters in Israel's Nahal Hever, where rebels during the Bar Kokhba revolt hid their correspondence, maintained documents in near-perfect condition despite summer heat that regularly exceeds 100 degrees Fahrenheit. The secret, consistent low humidity, not cool temperatures, is the key to longevity. Yet these fragile time capsules now face new threats. Climate change is altering desert humidity patterns, while looting and conflict put irreplaceable collections at risk. The Timbuktu manuscripts, thousands of scholarly works from medieval West Africa, were smuggled to safety in 2012 as militants occupied northern Mali, hidden in trunks and even vegetable carts to prevent their destruction. Their survival highlights both the resilience of desert archives and their vulnerability in a changing world. Perhaps the most poignant lesson from these desert libraries is how much history remains undiscovered. Satellite imagery suggests there are thousands of potential archaeological sites across the Sahara and Arabian deserts, many likely containing written records. Each could rewrite our understanding of trade routes, scientific knowledge, or religious movements. The desert has been keeping secrets for millennia. Slowly, patiently, it's beginning to share them. Long before scientists pieced together the Sahara's green passed through sediment cores and satellite images, the region's transformation lived on in stories passed down through generations. The ancient Egyptians spoke of Set, the god of deserts and storms, who embodied the harshness of the arid lands that surrounded their fertile Nile Valley. Their mythology didn't just personify the desert, it encoded a cultural memory of environmental change, framing the expanding sands as a cosmic battle between order and chaos. Similar echoes resound in the Old Testament's account of the Exodus, where the Israelites wander for 40 years in a wilderness so unforgiving that miracles become necessary for survival. The desert here isn't just a setting, it's a testing ground, a place where faith and resilience face their ultimate challenge. Halfway across the world, Australia's Aboriginal peoples tell dreamtime stories of ancestral beings who shaped the land during their journeys. In these tales, the transformation of lush areas into deserts often serves as punishment for breaking sacred laws. The Pitjantjatjara people recount how the Wanampi, water serpents, retreated underground when humans became greedy, taking their life-giving waters with them and leaving the land parched. What sounds like myth may actually preserve observations of real climate shifts, oral histories that track the continent's gradual drying over millennia. When modern researchers compared these stories with geological records, they found striking correlations between legendary events and known periods of environmental change. The Arabian Peninsula's folklore takes this blending of ecology and narrative even further. Bedouin poets for centuries have woven elegies for lost oases and vanished grasslands, their verses serving as both lament and warning. One recurring motif is the story of Aram of the Pillars, a fabulously wealthy city said to have been buried by sand as divine punishment for its arrogance, a tale that may have inspired the later legend of Ubar. These stories aren't just entertainment, they're survival manuals disguised as fables, teaching each new generation how to read the land's subtle signs and respect its fragile balance. Perhaps most poignant are the Native American traditions of the Southwest, where pueblos tell of the hero twins who brought order to a world ravaged by monsters. The water-devouring creatures in these stories mirror the very real threats of drought and desertification that shaped ancestral Puebloan life. Their kiva ceremonies, which include intricate dances to summon rain, reflect a deep understanding that human survival is inextricably linked to the environment's whims. Even the placement of their cliff dwellings seems to encode knowledge of water sources and seasonal patterns, practical wisdom wrapped in sacred tradition. What unites these diverse traditions is their recognition of deserts as places of profound transformation, both physical and spiritual. The biblical story of Hagar finding a spring in the wilderness, the Sufi mystics who sought enlightenment in the desert's emptiness, the Navajo vision quests in the parched beauty of Canyon de Chelly, all speak to humanity's complex relationship with arid land. These narratives don't just describe the world, they shape how generations have understood their place within it. The desert's harshness becomes a crucible that forges identity, tests limits, and sometimes, like the phoenix rising from ashes, offers rebirth amidst the ruins. Modern science is only beginning to catch up with these ancient insights. As researchers decode pollen records and study tree rings, they're finding that many mythic events align with verifiable climate shifts. The stories our ancestors told weren't mere fantasy. They were sophisticated ways of preserving vital ecological knowledge across generations. In an era of accelerating climate change, these desert legends offer more than cultural fascination. They provide timeless lessons about adaptation, humility, and the delicate dance between humanity and an ever-changing Earth. The tools of modern exploration have transformed how we see deserts, not as static wastelands, but as dynamic landscapes hiding layers of lost history. Gone are the days when archaeologists relied solely on shovels and luck. Now, drones equipped with thermal cameras soar over dunes, detecting subtle temperature variations that betray buried walls or ancient riverbeds invisible to the naked eye. In Saudi Arabia's Nafud Desert, these flying sentinels recently pinpointed the outlines of a sprawling prehistoric hunting site, where stone-built kites, massive funnel-shaped traps, guided gazelles into enclosures thousands of years ago. What's staggering isn't just the scale of these discoveries, but their immediacy. Data that once took decades to collect now streams to researchers' laptops in real time, reshaping our understanding of human adaptation. Ground-penetrating radar takes this revelation even deeper, literally. By sending electromagnetic pulses into the Earth, it creates ghostly images of buried structures without disturbing a single grain of sand. In Namibia's hyper-arid Namib Desert, this technology exposed a labyrinth of fossilized termite mounds dating back 34 million years, their intricate tunnels preserved like a subterranean Pompeii. These aren't just curiosities, they're climate proxies. The mound's composition holds clues to ancient rainfall patterns, helping scientists predict how modern ecosystems might respond to drought. Similarly, in Arizona's Sonoran Desert, radar unveiled a network of Hohokam irrigation canals buried under 6 feet of sediment, proof that today's water scarcity isn't entirely natural, but shaped by centuries of human intervention. Artificial intelligence, meanwhile, sifts through petabytes of satellite data to find patterns no human could discern. A team at the University of Arkansas trained an AI to identify potential archaeological sites in the Chihuahuan Desert by analyzing vegetation anomalies, subtle differences in plant growth that hint at buried ruins altering soil moisture. The algorithm flagged over 500 previously unknown locations, including what may be the northernmost outpost of the Mesoamerican city of Pacuame. But AI's most profound role may lie in predicting future desertification. By feeding climate models with paleo-environmental data, from fossil pollen to sediment layers, researchers at MIT are simulating how today's arid zones might expand or contract under various warming scenarios. Yet for all this technological prowess, some truths still emerge from old-fashioned fieldwork. In Chile's Atacama Desert, the driest place on Earth, botanists recently discovered microbial colonies thriving inside salt crystals, drawing moisture from morning fog. These extremophiles mirror life forms that might exist on Mars, but they also echo organisms that once flourished during the Atacama's rare wet periods. Similarly, in Mongolia's Gobi Desert, herders guiding scientists to crumbling ruins have revealed caravan stops along the Silk Road that maps never recorded. Their oral histories, passed down through generations, often prove as precise as LiDAR scans, a reminder that technology works best when paired with human wisdom. What ties these modern explorations together is their power to rewrite narratives. The Sahara's green phases were once considered brief anomalies. We now know they spanned millennia, with profound implications for human migration. The empty deserts of Arabia hid thriving Neolithic societies clustered around lakes we're only beginning to map. Each discovery peels back another layer, showing that these landscapes aren't just backdrops to history, they're active participants, shaping and shaped by life. As climate change accelerates, the urgency of this work grows. The desert's buried archives don't just illuminate the past, they hold urgent lessons about resilience, collapse, and the delicate balance between human ambition and environmental limits. One of the most surreal sights in Egypt's western desert isn't a pyramid or temple. It's the jagged, yellowed bones of ancient whales jutting from the sand. These skeletal remains, some over 40 million years old, belong to creatures like Basilosaurus, a serpentine predator that once hunted in shallow seas covering what's now one of the driest places on Earth. Standing beside these fossils with nothing but endless dunes stretching to the horizon feels like stepping into a cosmic joke, proof that landscapes we assume are permanent are anything but. The Great Sand Sea, a sprawling ocean of dunes near the Libyan border, holds even deeper secrets. Beneath its waves of sand lie the petrified remains of mangrove roots, coral reefs, and seafloor sediments, all whispering the same unbelievable truth: this desert was once a thriving marine ecosystem. The mechanics of this transformation are written in the rocks themselves. Layers of limestone, packed with seashells and microscopic marine organisms, form the bedrock beneath the Sahara's sands. In places like Wadi al-Hitan, literally Valley of the Whales, wind erosion has sculpted these ancient seabeds into eerie, wave-like formations, as if the very land remembers its liquid past. Paleontologists studying these fossils face a peculiar challenge: working in a desert so harsh that sunscreen melts off skin, while piecing together a world that was once submerged under tropical waters. The whale fossils here aren't just curiosities, they're missing links in evolution. Basilosaurus, for instance, had vestigial hind legs, a smoking gun in the story of how mammals returned to the sea. But the real mind bender isn't just that the desert was underwater. It's how recently this shift occurred in geological terms. The Tethys Sea, the ancient waterway that birthed these whales, vanished only about 30 million years ago as Africa collided with Eurasia, pushing the seafloor upward to become the Sahara's foundation. That might sound like deep time, but consider this: the Nile, which now seems like Egypt's eternal lifeline, is a mere infant by comparison, having formed less than 6 million years ago. The desert's memory is layered like a cake, with each era leaving clues: whale bones from one age, stone tools from another, and the ever-shifting dunes of the present. What makes the Western Desert's secrets so gripping is how they force us to rethink boundaries. We imagine deserts and oceans as opposites, but geology laughs at such neat categories. In Chile's Atacama Desert, salt flats crusted with crystals are the ghosts of evaporated seas, while in Arizona's petrified forest, the silica-rich logs of ancient conifers hint at a landscape that swung from swamp to desert and back again. These places remind us that Earth's surface is more like a kaleidoscope than a snapshot, always rearranging itself given enough time. The implications stretch beyond scientific curiosity. As climate change alters coastlines and droughts reshape continents, the Western Desert's whale bones stand as a monument to planetary instability. They ask us a provocative question: if oceans can become deserts, could today's deserts one day return to water? Satellite data already shows parts of the Sahara experiencing increased rainfall, while aquifers beneath the dunes hold enough fossil water to theoretically recreate vanished lakes. The Great Sand Sea's fossils aren't just relics, they're a glimpse of possible futures, written in the bones of creatures that never imagined their world could change so utterly. The Nabateans didn't just build Petra's stunning temples, they crafted an entire hydrological civilization in stone. Their agricultural terraces, carved into sheer cliff faces, weren't mere decoration, they were precision instruments for survival. Each level slowed rushing rainwater, allowing it to seep into the soil rather than erode precious topsoil. Modern researchers studying these structures made a startling discovery. The Nabateans mixed crushed sandstone into their terraces, creating a porous material that acted like a sponge, storing moisture for crops during dry spells. This ancient innovation is now being revived in Jordan's Badia region, where engineers combine traditional terrace designs with modern geotextiles to combat advancing desertification. Half a continent away, another ancient marvel still quenches thirsty fields after 3,000 years. Persia's Qanat's underground tunnels that tap into mountain aquifers are feats of gravity-powered genius. Unlike open canals that lose water to evaporation, these hand-dug channels slope gently downward, delivering cool, clean water with minimal loss. In Iran's dashed Ekavir desert, some Qanats stretch over 30 miles, their vertical access shafts spaced like stitches across the landscape. The real brilliance lies in their communal upkeep. Villages developed intricate water-sharing laws and maintenance schedules, creating what may be history's first sustainable water cooperatives. Today, NGOs from Morocco to Afghanistan are training communities to repair abandoned Qanats, with one restored system in Yazd province boosting crop yields by 40% without drilling a single new well. But perhaps the most surprising revival comes from the American Southwest, where Hopi dry farming techniques, once nearly forgotten, are yielding bumper crops in drought years. Unlike modern irrigation, these methods work with desert rhythms rather than against them. Farmers plant deep-rooted heritage corn varieties in wide-spaced basins, then mulch the soil with volcanic ash to retain nighttime moisture. The result, corn that thrives on just 8 inches of annual rainfall, less than half what conventional agriculture requires. Research stations in Arizona now validate what Hopi elders always knew. Some desert soils hold hidden moisture reserves that capillary action brings upward, like a natural wicking system. The common thread in these ancient systems is their reverence for scarcity. Where modern agriculture often tries to overwhelm nature with brute force irrigation, traditional methods employ subtlety and observation. In Tunisia's Matmata region, Berber farmers still use mescat orchard sunken gardens that collect dew and funnel it to tree roots. Oman's aflage systems distribute water via timed gates based on lunar cycles, while Peru's pre-Incan, waru raised fields create microclimates that protect crops from frost and drought simultaneously. These aren't relics, they're time-tested technologies that outperform industrial approaches in resilience, if not in sheer volume. What makes these rediscoveries so urgent is their potential to address modern crises. In California's Central Valley, where overpumping has caused land to sink by nearly 30 feet in places, some farmers are adopting Nabatean-style terracing to recharge aquifers. Chinese researchers studying ancient Turpan-Carrez systems, Qanat-like tunnels in Xinjiang, found they lose 70% less water to evaporation than concrete canals. Even high-tech solutions are borrowing from antiquity. Solar-powered drip irrigation in Kenya's drylands mimics the water efficiency of desert oases, while fog harvesting nets in Chile's Atacama desert update techniques used by the Chinchorro people 6,000 years ago. Yet implementing these ancient wisdoms faces modern hurdles. Qanat digging requires skills passed down through generations, knowledge that's disappearing faster than the aquifers themselves. Traditional crops like teff or amaranth may be drought-resistant, but global markets favor water-intensive staples like wheat and rice. The greatest challenge may be cultural, relearning patience in an era accustomed to quick fixes. Ancient desert farmers planned in generations, not growing seasons a timescale that clashes with contemporary economics. The lesson from these age-old systems isn't about rejecting technology, but about blending innovation with tradition. In Rajasthan's Thar Desert, farmers now combine satellite weather data with traditional rainwater harvesting, creating hybrid systems that honor the past while embracing the future. Similarly, Arizona's desert farming initiative pairs solar sensors with Hopi planting calendars, proving that ancient and modern can flourish together. As climate change tightens its grip on the world's drylands, these time capsule techniques offer more than nostalgia. They provide a blueprint for survival in an increasingly thirsty world. At the height of the African humid period, a body of water so vast it dwarfed the Caspian Sea sprawled across what is now the Sahara's southern edge. Paleo Lake Mega Chad, as scientists call it, covered over 150,000 square miles, an area larger than modern Germany. Its shorelines, now etched into the desert-like bathtub rings, reveal a world where hippos wallowed in lagoons and early fishermen cast nets into waters teeming with tilapia. Today, all that remains is Lake Chad, a shrunken puddle barely 1/20th the size of its ancestor, its rapid disappearance mirroring the ancient catastrophe in Fast Forward. The death of Mega Chad wasn't a sudden event, but a slow suffocation written in layers of mud. Sediment cores drilled from its former bed tell the story in alternating bands of fossilized algae and wind-blown dust. During wet phases, thriving aquatic plants left behind dark organic layers. As conditions dried, these gave way to pale bands of quartz grains, the fingerprints of advancing deserts. The most startling discovery, this cycle played out multiple times. Like a heartbeat fading, Mega Chad expanded and contracted over millennia until around 5,000 years ago, the monsoons weakened permanently and the Great Lake gasped its last. Human civilizations along its shores faced impossible choices. The Sao people, who built clay cities along Mega Chad's fertile margins, left behind mounds of pottery and fish bones that now lie miles from any water. Their descendants, the Kanyori, still recount oral histories of a time when the water stretched beyond the horizon, though few connect these tales to the cracked earth they farm today. Similar dramas unfolded around other vanished desert lakes. In Australia's Willandra Lakes region, Aboriginal groups thrived on freshwater mussels and fish until the waters retreated, leaving behind the world's oldest known cremation site at Lake Mungo, a poignant memorial to lives upended by drying climates. What makes these ancient lakes so valuable to modern science isn't just their dramatic stories, it's the warning signs they left behind. When researchers analyzed satellite images of Mega Chad's fossil deltas, they noticed something unsettling. The same branching river patterns seen in its extinct northern tributaries are now appearing in the lake's remaining southern inflows. This suggests the modern lake is following its ancestors' footsteps toward oblivion, with climate change and overuse accelerating the process. The parallels are eerie. Just as the Garamonte civilization collapsed when their groundwater ran dry, today's Lake Chad Basin supports nearly 30 million people facing similar pressures. Yet within these tragedies lie glimmers of hope. Around the remnants of Kazakhstan's Aral Sea, once the fourth largest lake on Earth before Soviet irrigation schemes drained it, new conservation efforts show how lessons from the past might alter the future. By studying how fish species adapted when Mega Chad shrank, biologists are identifying which modern species might survive Lake Chad's fluctuations. Meanwhile, geologists mapping Mega Chad's ancient underground connections to the Nubian aquifer have proposed ambitious plans to artificially recharge the lake using fossil water. The most profound lesson from these ghost lakes may be their reminder of nature's elasticity. Fossilized crocodile teeth in the Sahara and ancient boat engravings in Arabia's empty quarter prove that even the driest places can remember wetness. As climate models predict more extreme droughts, these vanished waters urge us to ask, which of today's lakes will become tomorrow's legends, and what stories will future civilizations tell about our response to their disappearance? The desert wind doesn't whisper, it sculpts. Across the Sahara's vast ergs, dunes migrate like slow motion waves, some traveling over 50 feet in a single year. This relentless movement isn't chaos, it's a meticulous archival system. When winds peel back layers of sand in Egypt's western desert, they expose the bones of prehistoric whales that swam here 40 million years ago. But when the gusts shift direction, those same fossils vanish beneath new mountains of grit within months. This endless hide and seek preserves artifacts in a way no museum could, sealing them from decay in Earth's driest vaults, then revealing them only when the desert chooses to share its secrets. In Namibia's Skeleton Coast, the interplay between wind and sand has created one of archaeology's most dramatic treasure hunts. Shipwrecks from the 16th century emerge like ghosts when dunes retreat, their wooden timbers perfectly preserved by the hyper-arid climate. A year later, the same wreck might be buried under 30 feet of sand, its location marked only by shifting ridgelines. This isn't destruction, it's curation. The same winds that erased entire cities like Ubar from human memory also protected their ruins from looters and the elements for millennia. Satellite images now show ancient caravan routes appearing and disappearing like desert mirages, their outlines visible only when wind patterns align to sweep the sand just right. The real magic happens at the microscopic level. Sand grains don't simply bounce along, they perform an intricate dance called saltation. Each particle leaps forward, strikes the ground, and kicks up others in a chain reaction that can polish stone surfaces into surreal shapes. In Algeria's Tassili Enaja, this natural sandblasting has etched caves into open-air galleries, revealing prehistoric rock art that would have remained hidden under mineral deposits in wetter climates. The wind's abrasive power also uncovers geological oddities like Libya's desert glass. Chunks of yellow-green silica formed by meteorite impacts 28 million years ago, now scattered across dunes where breezes expose them grain by grain. Yet these same forces that reveal can just as easily conceal. In China's Taklamakan Desert, entire sections of the Silk Road vanished under migrating dunes when wind patterns shifted during the Little Ice Age. The ruins of the Lulan Kingdom, a vital oasis stopover, were swallowed so completely that early 20th century explorers walked right over them without noticing. It took a freak windstorm in 1900 to expose wooden houses with untouched furnishings, a Pompeii of the sands frozen in time. Modern archaeologists working here face a race against the elements, knowing their excavation sites might disappear overnight if the wind changes course. What makes desert winds so extraordinary is their dual role as destroyers and preservers. In Peru's Nazca Desert, steady breezes prevent erosion of the famous geoglyphs by sweeping away dust that might otherwise obscure them. Yet just 50 miles away, similar winds are slowly sandblasting the adobe walls of Chan Chan, the largest pre-Columbian city in South America, back into powder. This paradox extends to fossils too. While winds uncover dinosaur bones in Morocco's Kem beds, they're simultaneously wearing away the fragile edges of those same specimens. The desert doesn't discriminate, it simply obeys the physics of air and friction. The latest technology is learning to work with these invisible architects. At the Al Watba fossil site in Abu Dhabi, paleontologists use wind models to predict where new specimens might emerge, tracking dune movements with drone surveys. In Arizona's cactus forest, researchers discovered that saguaro cacti skeletons align perfectly with prevailing winds, a natural compass that helped reconstruct ancient wind patterns from fossilized remains. Even NASA applies these lessons, studying how Martian winds shape dunes to better understand the red planet's geological history. Standing in a desert sandstorm, it's easy to see only destruction. The stinging grit, the reduced visibility, the sense of nature's raw power. But these winds are also master librarians, carefully turning the pages of Earth's history book. They bury chapters to preserve them, then reveal passages when the time is right. The ruins of Petra, the fossils of Wadi al-Hitan, the lost cities of the Silk Road, all owe their survival to the very forces that first obscured them. In the desert, stillness is an illusion. Change is the only constant, written in the endless conversation between wind and sand. Buried in the genetic code of ancient grains lies a survival story written over thousands of years, one that could rewrite the future of farming in a warming world. Take sorghum, a crop first domesticated in Africa's Sahel region, where rainfall is as unpredictable as a dice roll. Unlike modern wheat, which demands steady water, sorghum does something extraordinary. When drought strikes, it slips into a state of suspended animation, its leaves curling to conserve moisture. Then, at the first hint of rain, it springs back to life like a time traveler unfreezing. This isn't just resilience, it's a biological masterpiece forged in the crucible of deserts. Millet, sorghum's lesser-known cousin, holds its own secrets. Finger millet, grown in India's arid regions for over 4,000 years, packs more calcium than milk and stores without spoiling for decades, a built-in survival strategy for lean years. Archaeologists digging in Sudan's Nubian desert found clay pots still filled with perfectly preserved millet from a civilization that collapsed around 2,000 years ago. The grain outlasted the kingdom that cultivated it, a testament to its durability. These crops weren't just staples, they were life insurance policies encoded in DNA, bred by generations of farmers who understood that abundance and famine were two sides of the same coin. The irony is that these desert-adapted superfoods were sidelined by the very agricultural revolutions meant to feed the world. When colonial powers introduced water-intensive wheat and rice to arid regions, traditional crops like teff, a tiny Ethiopian grain that thrives where other plants wither, were dismissed as peasant food. Yet modern science is now playing catch-up with ancient wisdom. Researchers at the International Crops Research Institute for the Semi-Arid Tropics have discovered that sorghum's drought tolerance comes from a unique arrangement of root fungi, a symbiotic relationship fine-tuned over millennia. Meanwhile, millet's deep roots, sometimes reaching 15 feet, tap into groundwater inaccessible to most crops, making it essentially drought-proof. The revival of these lost crops isn't just academic. It's unfolding in fields from Rajasthan to Oklahoma. In Niger, farmers abandoning failed cotton crops have returned to pearl millet, doubling their yields without irrigation. Arizona's Tohono O'odham Nation has revived cultivation of tepary beans, a nitrogen-fixing legume that produces harvests with just 3 inches of annual rain, less than a tenth of what commercial beans require. Even chefs are joining the movement, with restaurants from London to Nairobi featuring dishes made from fonio, a West African grain that matures in just 6 weeks and grows in near-sterile soils. What makes these ancient plants so revolutionary is their dual role as climate adapters and nutritional powerhouses. Amaranth, once sacred to the Aztecs, contains complete protein rivaling eggs, while quinoa, domesticated in the high-altitude deserts of the Andes, packs all 9 essential amino acids. Compare this to modern wheat, which has been bred for yield at the cost of nutrient density. Studies show that today's wheat contains up to 30% less zinc and iron than varieties grown a century ago. The desert crop's compact genomes, honed by harsh conditions, often concentrate nutrients as a survival strategy, turning austerity into abundance. Yet challenges remain. Centuries of neglect mean many traditional varieties are endangered, their seeds preserved only in remote villages or gene banks. The Ethiopian Biodiversity Institute alone safeguards over 5,000 types of teff, each with unique drought or disease resistance, but few make it to commercial markets. Mechanization is another hurdle. Sorghum's tough stalks clog conventional harvesters, while teff's pinhead-sized seeds require specialized processing. Overcoming these barriers means blending old and new. In Kenya, engineers have adapted coffee hullers to process finger millet, boosting production 20-fold. The real promise of these desert crops lies in their ability to turn marginal lands into breadbaskets. As aquifers drain and rains grow erratic, the world's agricultural frontiers are shifting from fertile plains to once ignored dryland. In this new reality, the crops that survived centuries of climatic turmoil may hold the keys to our future, not as relics but as pioneers. The fields of tomorrow might not resemble the endless wheat seas of the past, but rather patchworks of drought-defying grains, their roots gripping the earth like fists, whispering an ancient lesson: scarcity breeds ingenuity. When the land dries up, so too does patience. In Darfur, what began as a dispute between herders and farmers over dwindling pastureland spiraled into one of the 21st century's most brutal conflicts. At first glance, the violence appeared rooted in ethnic divisions, but peel back the layers and you'll find a more insidious culprit: the creeping advance of the Sahara. Over decades, rainfall patterns shifted, wells ran dry, and the line between arable land and desert blurred. Cattle herders, their traditional grazing routes vanishing, pushed south into farming communities, igniting tensions that opportunistic leaders weaponized into full-scale war. This wasn't just a political crisis, it was a climate crisis disguised as war, a warning of how environmental collapse can unravel the social fabric. Syria's civil war followed a similar blueprint. Between 2006 and 2010, the country endured its worst drought in 900 years, a catastrophe compounded by outdated irrigation practices and over-pumped aquifers. Crops failed, livestock perished, and over 1.5 million rural Syrians fled to urban slums, straining resources in cities already buckling under refugee inflows from Iraq. The government's failure to address this rural collapse became kindling for unrest. Farmers who once tended olive groves joined protests. Displaced herders became recruits for armed groups. Scholars at the Center for Climate and Security later identified this drought as a threat multiplier, exacerbating the grievances that exploded in 2011. The desert didn't pull the trigger, but it loaded the gun. These conflicts reveal a pattern older than civilization itself. When survival hangs in the balance, cooperation frays. The Akkadian Empire collapsed during a 24th century B.C. megadrought, its cuneiform tablets lamenting dust clouds and salt in the fields. The Maya faced wars over water as their reservoirs evaporated. Even today, Lake Chad's shrinking shores have become a battleground for Boko Haram and fishing communities competing over vanishing fish stocks. What unites these flashpoints isn't just scarcity, but the failure to adapt governance to changing realities. Traditional water-sharing agreements, like those of the Afghan Kharez systems or the Bedouin tribal codes, often break down when unprecedented droughts test their limits. Yet there's a counter-narrative emerging. In Niger, where desertification once fueled clashes between Fulani herders and farmers, a quiet revolution is unfolding. Villagers now map grazing corridors and crop zones using satellite data, creating buffer areas where seasonal migration can occur without trampling fields. Rainfall collection ponds dug along these routes provide neutral gathering spots, transforming potential conflict zones into spaces for trade and dialogue. Similarly, in Jordan's Azraq Basin, solar-powered desalination units managed jointly by Syrian refugees and local Bedouin have turned water from a source of tension into a tool for reconciliation. These solutions aren't about stopping desertification. They're about rewriting the rules of survival in an era of instability. The lesson buried in the sands of Darfur and Syria isn't that climate change causes war, it's that it exposes broken systems. Droughts test the strength of institutions, the fairness of resource distribution, and the flexibility of cultures. Where governments respond with inclusive policies and innovation, as in Namibia's communal conservancies, even severe aridification can be managed without violence. But where corruption and inequality already fester, as in pre-war Syria, drought becomes the spark in a tinderbox. The deserts advancing across our planet aren't just ecological phenomena, they're mirrors reflecting back our capacity or failure to share a world of shrinking abundance. Across the southern edge of the Sahara, an audacious experiment is taking root not with flashy technology, but with humble saplings and ancient wisdom. The Great Green Wall, Africa's bold initiative to grow an 8,000-kilometer mosaic of trees and shrubs across the continent's widest point, isn't just about holding back desert sands. It's a living laboratory where traditional knowledge and modern science collide to rewrite the story of degradation. In Senegal, where the project began, farmers now plant drought-resistant acacias alongside crops like millet and sorghum. The trees' deep roots stabilize the soil, while their leaves provide shade and fodder for livestock. A revival of the parkland systems their ancestors used before colonial monocultures took hold. Satellite data reveals something astonishing. Areas where the wall has flourished show a 15% increase in rainfall over a decade, proving that vegetation doesn't just respond to climate, it can shape it. But restoration isn't limited to grand gestures. In Niger's Zinda region, a quiet revolution called farmer-managed natural regeneration has transformed 5 million hectares of barren land. Instead of expensive tree planting campaigns, villagers simply protect the shoots sprouting from dormant root systems beneath their fields. These underground forests, long suppressed by overgrazing and clearing, have surged back with astonishing speed. One farmer, Ibrahim Idi, recalls how his grandfather warned him the land was dying. Now his fields bristle with gourd trees, their nitrogen-rich leaves fertilizing the soil naturally. The technique costs almost nothing, yet yields have doubled and bird species absent for generations have returned. This isn't just land healing, it's an entire ecosystem remembering itself. The tools of restoration vary as wildly as the landscapes they revive. In China's Quebuqi Desert, straw checkerboards, simple grids of wheat stalks pressed into the sand create microclimates where shrubs can take hold, stabilizing dunes that once swallowed villages. Meanwhile, in Jordan's Badia Steppe, scientists are coating seeds in clay capsules that absorb dew, giving them a fighting chance to germinate in near-zero rainfall. Perhaps most unexpectedly, Australia's indigenous rangers are combing desert archives for clues, rediscovering native grasses like spinifex, whose roots bind soil so effectively they're inspiring new biodegradable plastics. What unites these efforts is their recognition that deserts aren't enemies to defeat, but damaged relationships to repair. The Yakauba Sawadogo technique, digging waist-deep planting pits called zai that concentrate moisture around crops, mirrors how termite mounds naturally channel water in dry land. In Rajasthan, ancient Johad's earthen dams that capture monsoon rains are being resurrected after decades of neglect, recharging aquifers and ending water wars between villages. Even livestock, often blamed for desertification, are being reimagined as allies. Holistic planned grazing, which mimics wild herd movements, has restored grasslands from New Mexico to Kenya by stimulating plant growth with precisely timed hoof action. The challenges remain staggering: political instability, funding shortfalls, and climate change itself loom over every sapling. Yet the deserts themselves offer sly encouragement. In Chile's Atacama, the driest place on Earth, rare lluvias de invierno winter rains trigger explosions of wildflowers, proof that even the most barren landscapes hold latent life, waiting for the right conditions to awaken. Perhaps that's the ultimate lesson of these restoration projects. Despair is a luxury the desert cannot afford. Every revived hectare, every returning bird species, every child who grows up knowing trees where their parents saw only dust, whispers that the land's memory is longer than its wounds. Climate models paint a paradoxical future for the world's deserts, one where some arid zones expand relentlessly, while others might unexpectedly awaken from their dry slumber. Take the American Southwest, where rising temperatures and dwindling snowpack could push the Sonoran Desert northward, transforming parts of Utah and Colorado into landscapes more familiar to Arizona. Satellite data already shows soil moisture levels dropping faster than predicted, with ancient piñon pines dying off in New Mexico and ranchers selling cattle they can no longer water. Yet halfway across the world, the Sahara tells a different story. Some regions near its southern edge, like northern Niger, have seen rainfall increase by 10% over the past 2 decades, a tantalizing hint that orbital cycles or shifting wind patterns might one day nudge parts of the desert back toward their greener past. The wild card in these projections is human ingenuity. Israel's Negev Desert, once considered uninhabitable, now blooms with crops grown using drip irrigation and desalinated seawater. Solar farms stretching across Morocco's arid plains generate clean energy while reducing evaporation from the soil beneath. Even hyper-arid regions like Chile's Atacama are becoming hubs for lithium extraction, powering the batteries that could slow global warming. These innovations suggest deserts aren't just victims of climate change, they're potential allies in mitigating it. But there's a catch: every solution carries unintended consequences. The same lithium mines draining Atacama's scarce groundwater threaten indigenous communities and flamingo populations, proving that even green technology can strain fragile ecosystems. What makes this moment so pivotal is the interplay between natural cycles and human intervention. The Sahara's past greening episodes were driven by subtle shifts in Earth's orbit, changes that unfolded over millennia. Today, we're altering the climate at breakneck speed, compressing transformations that once took centuries into decades. In places like Spain's Almeria region, where greenhouses now cover an area larger than Manhattan, humans have essentially hacked the desert to grow tomatoes year-round. Yet just beyond these plastic-covered oases, overpumping has caused aquifers to collapse, sinking the land by several inches annually. The lesson is clear: we can reshape deserts, but not without consequences. The most hopeful experiments blend cutting-edge science with ancient wisdom. In Burkina Faso, farmers have revived a 1,000-year-old technique called zaya, digging small pits to concentrate rainwater around crop roots. Combined with drought-resistant millet varieties developed by modern geneticists, these methods have turned barren fields into productive land. Similarly, Arizona's Biosphere 2 project demonstrated how closed ecosystems could potentially green arid zones by meticulously recycling every drop of water. These approaches don't fight desertification, they dance with it, working within the limits of scarce resources rather than trying to overwhelm them. Ultimately, deserts will have the last word. Their future hinges on factors both vast and minute, from global CO2 emissions to the way a single farmer tends her soil. The sands remember every drought and deluge, every civilization that rose and fell at their edges. As we stand at this crossroads, their shifting dunes ask us a silent question. Will we repeat the mistakes of the Garamontes and Ubar, or will we learn to read the land's subtle warnings? The answer won't just determine the fate of deserts, it will shape the habitability of our entire planet. The ruins of Petra and the buried canals of the Garamontes whisper a truth we're only beginning to grasp. Civilizations that thrived in ancient deserts didn't conquer nature, they learned its rhythms. Take the Nabateans' water collection systems, carved with such precision that they could funnel every drop of a passing storm into cisterns. This wasn't just engineering, it was a profound understanding that survival meant working with scarcity, not against it. Their cities didn't tower over the landscape, they nestled into it, using rock faces as natural coolants and wind patterns as invisible architects. Compare this to modern Las Vegas, where fountains spray imported water into 110-degree heat, and the lesson becomes stark. Adaptation isn't about dominance but harmony. What's startling is how these ancient strategies mirror cutting-edge science. The Berbers for Gauras, those underground tunnels that tapped fossil water without wasting a drop, operated on the same principles as today's most efficient drip irrigation systems. In Oman, archaeologists found stone traps that channeled monsoon floods into fields, a technique now being revived to recharge depleted aquifers. These weren't primitive solutions, they were elegant adaptations to environmental limits, refined over generations. The irony, we're now spending billions to reinvent what desert cultures already mastered. Solar-powered desalination plants, hailed as modern marvels, echo the Nabatean solar-aligned water channels, which used temperature gradients to reduce evaporation. Yet the most poignant lessons come from failures. The collapse of the Garamontes Empire when their aquifers ran dry mirrors California's Central Valley, sinking as wells are overpumped. The difference, the Garamontes had no satellites to warn them, no global markets to buffer their collapse. Their ruins stand as silent sentinels, urging us to read the warning signs we're now seeing: vanishing lakes, shifting dunes, crops withering in once fertile valleys. The ancestral pueblones left behind another clue. Their migration patterns tracked water sources, proving that sometimes resilience means mobility, not stubborn permanence. But these stories aren't just about survival, they're about thriving within limits. In Jordan's Wadi Fainan, once a copper mining hub that denuded its landscape, researchers found terraces where farmers grew olives in near-zero rainfall by harvesting dew. The technique, now being rediscovered, relies on stone piles that condense nighttime moisture into soil. Similarly, the Timbuktu manuscripts reveal medieval scholars debating crop rotation schedules to prevent soil exhaustion, a dialogue that feels eerily contemporary as modern agriculture depletes topsoil 17 times faster than it forms. Perhaps the greatest wisdom lies in what these cultures didn't do. There's little evidence of large-scale warfare over water in ancient desert societies. Instead, they developed intricate sharing systems, like the Aflaj channels of Oman that allocated water by timed gates. This communal approach, where resources were managed as shared trusts rather than private property, hints at a mindset we've lost. As the Colorado River shrinks and the Aral Sea vanishes, our impulse is to hoard what's left. But the desert's old guardians whisper another way: collaborate or collapse. The urgency of these lessons is etched into modern crises. Somalia's recurring famines follow the same pattern as the Akkadian Empire's collapse, drought exacerbated by unsustainable farming. Yet in Niger, farmers regenerating 5 million hectares of degraded land show that ancient techniques paired with satellite data can turn the tide. The desert's past isn't just a warning, it's a toolbox. From the drought-resistant crops our ancestors bred to the social contracts they forged in hard times, their legacy is a map not to some lost golden age, but to a future where we've finally learned to listen to the land. The shifting dunes and parched earth of today's deserts hide an astonishing truth. These landscapes are not fixed but fluid, shaped by forces far beyond human memory. Every grain of sand, every fossilized bone, every crumbling ruin whispers the same story. Change is the only constant. The Sahara's giraffes etched into cave walls, Arabia's whale bones resting 1,000 miles from the sea, the ghostly outlines of Ubar's towers swallowed by the Rub al-Khali. These aren't just curiosities. They're urgent reminders that the ground beneath our feet has rewritten itself before and will again. What makes these forgotten worlds so vital isn't just their drama, but their lessons. The Garamontes thrived for centuries by tapping fossil water, only to vanish when their wells ran dry. The Nabateans turned Petra's cliffs into rainwater harvesters, while the ancestral Pueblones retreated gracefully when the land could no longer sustain them. Their choices, some brilliant, some disastrous, mirror the crossroads we face today as aquifers drain and droughts intensify. The difference: we have the advantage of hindsight, the technology to see crises coming, and the wisdom of cultures who navigated these trials before us. Yet knowledge alone isn't enough. The deserts teach us that survival hinges on something deeper, a shift in mindset. Ancient societies that flourished viewed water as sacred, land as a shared trust, and scarcity as a call to innovation. Modern solutions like the Great Green Wall or solar-powered desalination are groundbreaking, but they'll fail without that same reverence for limits. Israel's revival of ancient runoff agriculture in the Negev, or Niger's farmers regrowing forests from dormant roots, prove that the old and new can fuse into something transformative. Perhaps the most humbling revelation lies in the desert's patience. They've watched empires rise and fall, climates pivot from wet to dry, and species adapt or perish. Their sands preserve not just ruins, but resilience, the stubborn millet grains that sprout after decades, the acacia seeds that wait centuries for rain, the underground rivers that flow unseen until tapped with care. These landscapes don't need us to fix them, they need us to listen. So what comes next? The answer isn't written in stone, but in the choices we make. Will we repeat the mistakes of Ubar, draining our resources until the earth gives way? Or will we mimic the Nabateans, shaping our cities to harness every drop? The deserts offer no guarantees, only possibilities. Their history whispers that collapse isn't inevitable, but neither is redemption without effort. The next chapter belongs to us. Will we be the generation that let the sands claim another civilization, or the one that learned to make the desert breathe again? As the wind scours another layer from the ruins of Petra, and satellites map lost rivers beneath the dunes, one truth becomes undeniable: the past isn't dead. It's a mirror, a warning, and just maybe a guide. The deserts have been here before. Now it's our turn to decide what they'll become. Share your thoughts below, and join us as we keep unearthing history's most profound mysteries, one grain of